Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now. Consequences of war. This morning, new claims by Russia that it's pulling back forces near Ukraine. Now, a skeptical President Biden warning Americans there will be consequences if Russia attacks overseas and at home.
If Russia decides to invade, that would also have consequences here at home. But the American people understand that defending democracy and liberty is never without cost.
But the president and allies insist the door to diplomacy is still open. We have team coverage this morning. A mandate debate heating up from coast to coast as more states lift their COVID restrictions and the CDC considers new guidance. Plus, controversy in the classroom as one major school district faces fallout over its pandemic response. Cold as ice, controversy in the rink after the Winter Olympics as the Russian figure skater at the center of a scandal over banned substances takes first place. Plus, a bad day for Team USA. The men's hockey team is eliminated in a dramatic shootout. We'll bring you the highlights. And Major League bummer. The start of spring training officially delayed by a months-long players' lockout. We'll have an update on the dispute between the MLB and the Players Union, plus what it could all mean for the regular season. Of course, something most people start to look forward to as we head into spring.
Yeah, because we've had so many sports lately, and now we're realizing, baseball's supposed to be next.
Oh, shoot, and we're not able to see it. We'll tell you the details of that a little bit later. We begin, though, today in Ukraine and what could be new signs of a step back from conflict with Russia.
This morning, Russia's defense ministry announced some troops and military units are leaving Crimea after finishing what it called tactical exercises. This comes just one day after Russia said it was pulling back some of its forces from the Ukrainian border. Speaking yesterday, President Biden expressed skepticism over that move and warned an invasion was still a major risk.
We have not yet verified the Russian military units are returning to their home bases. Indeed, our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position. And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border. An invasion remains distinctly possible. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense.
NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin is in Kyiv for us, and we're also joined by NBC News senior digital White House reporter Shannon Pettype. So, Aaron, let's start with you. For a second straight day, Russia is saying that it is pulling some of its forces back to their home bases. What's the reaction there, and are there hopes this could be the start of a broader pullback of troops from the border?
Hey, Joe, we just heard from the NATO Secretary General saying that NATO is seeing no signs of a de-escalation on the part of Russia. Said quite the contrary. If anything, they're seeing the military buildup by Russia on three sides of the Ukrainian border continue. Also noting that Russia has yet to engage in the proposal that NATO put on the table to address some of Russia's security concerns, and the Secretary General pushing Russia to engage in that diplomatic process. When Russia made this announcement that it was withdrawing some of its troops yesterday, that was met with skepticism here in Kyiv, with the Ukrainian foreign minister saying, we'll believe it when we see it. We heard from the Ukrainian defense minister this morning saying that the assessment of the Ukrainian military has not changed. It should be noted that Ukraine has long downplayed the threat of a military escalation by the part of Russia. Joe.
So, Shannon, as we heard yesterday from President Biden, Washington, like NATO, remains skeptical of these moves by Russia. Tell us more about why that is.
Well, I mean, we have not gotten a response from the White House on these developments overnight. But as you noted, as of yesterday afternoon, the president was saying that, one, the U.S. had not independently verified or been able to analyze these claims by the Russian Defense Ministry. They are not convinced that these troops are returning to their home base versus being repositioned, for example, somewhere else along the border. And the president reiterated that despite some changes that might be occurring on a small scale, broadly, Russia remains in what he described there, you heard a moment ago, as a very defensive posture. The U.S. has been quite skeptical all along and has said publicly that they are eyes wide open on the fact that Russia may carry out some deceptive military tactics along the way. They certainly saw that in 2014 during the annexation of Crimea, where unmarked Russian troops were being sent in to fight, who were essentially Russian soldiers but weren't wearing the Russian insignia. Those are the type of tactics the U.S. has seen from Russia before. So there is definitely a skepticism that they will believe it when they see it, and they are not going to be sort of distracted by any sort of actions Russia might take to sort of throw them off where the Russians may be going in a bigger sense.
So, Aaron, today Ukrainians are celebrating what's been dubbed as Unity Day, which President Zelensky declared just a few days ago. He addressed his nation again this morning. What's his message? Is there a feeling of unity in Ukraine?
Well, this morning at the National Stadium here in Kyiv, they unraveled a 200-meter-long Ukrainian flag. You're seeing Ukrainian flags throughout the country, people posting pictures of themselves wearing yellow and blue ribbons. And in a show of patriotism this morning, President Zelensky addressing the nation saying, "But we are united by a single desire, the desire to live in peace, happily with one family, with children, with parents. And we have every right to all of this because we are at home, we are in Ukraine, and no one will love our home the way we love, and no one but us together can protect our home." And to that effect, there is a new poll that was just released saying that 57.5% of Ukrainians are ready to resist in one way or another in the event of some sort of Russian attack. That is up from 50% when this particular poll was last taken in December, with only 17.9% saying they would do absolutely nothing in the event of a Russian attack. Speaking to Ukrainian military experts, they point to polls like this as evidence that this country is united against a potential Russian aggression and see that as a key deterrent, potential factor in the Kremlin's calculus whether or not to invade.
Aaron and Shannon, thank you both. Appreciate it.
We've got big news from the CDC this morning. It's considering relaxing its indoor masking guidelines, sources tell NBC News, and it could happen as early as next week. Several states have already made the call to drop their mask mandates for private businesses, but the battle over masking in schools is heating up in courts and districts across the country. NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella joins us now from Virginia. Hi, Heidi. Good morning. There's been a lot of confusion as states make these individual calls, but then the CDC hasn't changed its stance. Will this new guidance help match all these rules up? What are you hearing from the CDC about what they might do here?
That's the hope, Savannah. This is part of a broader architecture that the administration is trying to set forth that answers the question, how do we live with endemic COVID? This is one piece of that. The CDC looking at changing the criteria for when you should mask up. Basically, right now, they look at prevalence in the community. These are the factors that they look at. Looking forward, they're talking about other benchmarks like hospitalizations or severe disease. All of this, Savannah, to try and really localize the approach going forward to give local officials the tools that they need, but to appreciate that this is probably not the last time we're going to see a wave or potentially even a new variant. So we have to find a way to go back to life as normal as much as possible, but to give localities the tools to make those decisions.
Absolutely. Heidi, let's not talk about where you are. It's a state that's making news in this way. So Virginia looks likely to become the next Republican-led state to ban mask mandates in schools. Now, you've talked to people on both sides of this argument. So first, let's start with a mother you spoke with who's suing the governor there, Governor Glenn Youngkin, over his policy that makes masking optional in school. What did she tell you?
Yeah, and Savannah, this just in that the governor could be signing legislation to codify that as early as today. So we see dueling lawsuits and actually two moms on both sides of the issue. First, we talked to Tasha, whose son Jack, he's 10 years old. He has cystic fibrosis. And she says this is a blatant violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act because by definition, he would be segregated. He wouldn't be able to go to school for fear of getting so sick he could actually die. Here's some of what she told us.
I understand that masks are uncomfortable and frustrating, and none of us likes them very much. But for kids like mine, When other children take their masks off, it creates a barrier. He can no longer physically walk into his school building. Some of those students' disabilities may preclude them from wearing a mask. They need to be accommodated too. The basis of our concern is that when you take the ability of the school to make those accommodations away, then the children with disabilities are effectively being separated or segregated and excluded from their education.
And Savannah, Tasha wanted to make clear that she's not saying she wants masks all the time. These parents simply want localities and schools to be able to have the power to use masks when we are in periods of surge.
Heidi, thank you so much. And I know you also spoke with a mom on the other side of this issue who's actually suing her school district for defying this order. So lots to keep talking about here. We know you'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much, Heidi.
California has officially lifted its mask mandate for everyone except students. But one of the state's largest cities, there's fallout this morning over how the school board managed things during the pandemic. Overnight, parents in San Francisco recalled 3 school board members. But unlike many other school board fights across the country, this doesn't have to do specifically with mask mandates or what's being taught in the classroom. Parents say that school officials, quote, wasted time on matters unrelated to the coronavirus instead of reopening public schools, prioritizing social justice issues. NBC News correspondent Jake Ward joins us with more on this recall effort. So, Jake, let's start first of all with just the reason that 3 school board members are out of a job this morning. What do parents and critics say these officials were doing instead of focusing more on the pandemic?
Good morning, Joe. That's right. Parents here say that fundamentally they voted in favor of the recall because they felt that these 3 board members were incompetent. No one has been held to higher standards than educators during the pandemic, and the administration definitely bore a huge amount of the blame, they say, for what was not a very effective response. They especially talked about the mismanagement of the budget and also about an episode about a year ago in which about a third of the schools were set to be renamed away from historically insensitive names at a time, they say, when that was not really the case. We spoke to one mother about this, and here is how she described it.
I support things like nuanced school renaming. Children shouldn't have to go to schools named after people who are horrible, but the renaming process last year was just a farce. It was an embarrassment for our city.
Ms. Cameron there, along with many other parents, felt that that was a huge difficulty there. Also, the changing of an admissions system into the district's most prestigious high school, Lowell, went from a merit-based system to a lottery system was the proposal. That also seems to have brought people in here.
So, Jake, we know school board meetings across the country have been very tense, becoming political battlegrounds over the last year or so. People in San Francisco say it's not entirely about politics there. Why is that? And what is the feeling among those who voted against this recall?
Well, Joe, it is certainly not politics as we have seen it play out in school board controversies across the country. But it does seem to have touched a nerve in in San Francisco, which is famous for thinking about this stuff in a very progressive and subtle way. I spoke to one parent who voted against the recall, and he described what he attributes this change to. Have a listen.
We're not discussing critical race theory or banning books in San Francisco. But in a way, in a much more subtle manner, I think that these 3 have been pushing a change to make San Francisco unified a better, more equitable place, which is uncomfortable, right, for the ruling class, if you will.
Now, in the end, San Francisco Unified School District is losing students as people move away from incredibly expensive California. And you're seeing, a third of the students in that city going to private and parochial schools. So people here say this is just one of the sort of most sad outcomes for a place that has had just trouble, as so many places are, in handling with the pandemic.
So, Jake, some say this brings up a bigger issue, which is school funding. Quickly, what are some workers in the school district saying about that?
Well, I spoke to the president of the Service Workers Union for the district about just how hard it is to keep these schools going. Here's how he described the challenge.
We have over 155 sites, including administration-type buildings. Upkeep of these buildings, these are old. A lot of our buildings are old, and ventilation systems are not always working properly. Windows don't open. I mean, we have schools that are going to cost a lot of money to fix. But these ain't today's problems. These are problems that's been going on since the 80s.
Now that these three board members have been recalled, Joe, Mayor London Breed has the opportunity to replace them ahead of a new school board election in November, Joe.
All right, Jake Ward reporting on some big changes in San Francisco. Thank you.
Let's now bring in Dr. Ebony J Hilton. She's a professor of anesthesiology and critical care medicine. She's also the co-founder and medical director of Good Stock Consulting. Dr. Hilton, good to see you. So we just heard a moment ago at the top of the show from Heidi that the CDC is expected to loosen its indoor masking guidelines soon. Of course, this comes as several states have already done so. They've already dropped those mask mandates. So how do you take this? I mean, have we finally made it, sort of, if we see both the CDC and states doing it? Is now the right time to loosen these restrictions?
Yeah, you know, it's absolutely not. It's one of those things where we have to question what is the guiding force behind removing these restrictions when we know that currently, literally yesterday, we buried one American every 30 seconds. COVID-19 is not done with us. And when we think about, we say decrease in cases, decreasing from what? What is our baseline standard? Because right now, we have as many cases that we were having back when we had the Delta flare. That scared everyone, right? We have as many hospitalizations as that Delta flare. And we're seeing just as many deaths. So the question is, when are we going too fast? Because what we do know is that when we look at the timing of when Omicron hit, it was right after Biden mandated that we had vaccines. So many people are alive today simply because of that rule. And now that rule is being reversed. The mask regulations are being reversed. And we're going to see another surge. We know we'll have another variant, and we're going to have millions of Americans that are now vulnerable to falling to COVID-19.
So, Doctor, though, is what you're saying there that you're confident that we will have another surge or some other type of variant?
For sure. I mean, I don't think that's in question by any scientists at all. We know variants will come. We know right now in Denmark, the reason why we're seeing the increases in cases over in Europe is literally because of BA2, which is a self-Omicron. We know we now have that variant now in the United States of America. The question is not when, you know, it's literally where is it going to pop up next? Where is the next variant going to come? That's what viruses do. So at this point, what I urge the American public to consider, I know we are all tired. We're tired in the hospital, too. But we're also tired of burying people. We're also tired of having to have that conversations with families, both of young children to grandparents, of why there's nothing else we can do further. And we see that these cases are getting younger and younger because our older population, over 65 and older, they're 89% vaccinated. It's the younger groups that are not. And they're the ones that we're seeing, unfortunately, succumb to COVID-19.
Doctor, before I let you go, I do want to ask you a viewer question. This is from Brian in New Haven, Connecticut. It says, my kid got COVID during the Omicron surge in January. They had 2 Pfizer vaccines in June. I'm thinking about delaying the booster shot until October when they go back to school and infection usually starts to pick up. Would that leave them too vulnerable to infection between now and then? That's a good one. What do you say, doctor?
All right. You know, for one, I'm sorry about the children being infected. We know that children did get largely infected with Omicron just due to the policies not being in place to keep them safe in schools. But one thing I would urge you to think about is that we actually had the Delta wave. That was back in the summertime. Remember in June, July, when we lifted masks and we had the Delta wave that began? So to wait until October is definitely too late. You need to stay on target with the tracking process of when you're supposed to have your second dose, your third dose of these vaccines. And for, if you have Moderna or Pfizer, the mRNA vaccines, you need at least 6 months after you had that second dose to be getting that booster shot. And if you're immunocompromised, that 6 months shortens to 4 months. You really need to stay on top of that because, again, there will be another variant. This is not something that should surprise anyone. And at this point, with us lifting mask mandates and opening up, you know, concerts or Coachella and all these other events that are not going to require these safety protocols in place, then we know there's going to be another surge. And the question is, will you and your family be prepared?
All right, Dr. Ebony J Hilton, thank you so much. And if you have a question for one of our doctors, let us know. Email us at morningnewsnow@NBCUNI.com with your questions and let us know if you want to stay anonymous.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Which means Bill Cairns joins us this morning. Hey there, Bill.
Hey, good morning, guys. And we have our hands full. We'll call this like a kitchen sink type storm. We're throwing everything at you. We're going to see severe weather. We're going to get a winter weather, ice and snowstorm. We're going to have flash flooding, freezes, even ice jams are possible with this one. So let's get into it. There's not a lot happening yet. But as we go throughout the day today into tonight, that's when the storm really forms. And look at how many millions of people are affected by some sorts of advisories or alerts. Wind alerts, 70 million. Winter weather, 27 million. Flooding, 27 million. And that doesn't even bring in the 9 to 20 million over the next couple of days with severe weather threats. So obviously, severe weather gets the headline. You get concerned. They could be life-threatening weather with tornadoes, possibility of really strong winds. This is tonight, starting around Wichita Falls, Oklahoma City, and then heading towards Dallas, Tulsa, and in the morning towards Fort Smith. And then we continue the severe weather threat right through Little Rock, Memphis, Nashville, into the Louisville, Lexington area, Cincinnati, down to the south from Shreveport to Jackson, almost all of Alabama too. So 20 million people at risk tomorrow with that severe weather threat. And on top of all of this, we have areas that have snow on the ground that are going to hit 60 to 70 degrees with 1 to 2 inches of rain. So we get the rainfall, plus we get the snow melt, and a lot of the rivers have ice in them, so the ice will break up, and then we get ice jams, and that's just problematic. And the ice totals, so we go from rain to freezing rain in areas of Ohio. Watch out, St. Louis, north of Indianapolis, northern Ohio. You could see up to a ½ inch to a ¼ inch of ice. That could cause some damage. And then we also have snow, guys, too. And this would be probably the biggest snowstorm of the season. Kansas City to Chicago, a narrow strip of heavy snow, but this is for tomorrow morning's commute. So, as I said, I think I threw just about everything at you.
Yeah, no kidding. Looks messy.
All right, thanks, Bill. We'll talk to you next hour.
Thanks, guys.
Now it's day 12 of the Winter Olympics, and it's already been a triumphant day for Team USA on the slopes.
But with the thrill of victory also comes the agony of defeat. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us this morning from outside of Beijing with the latest on the game. Steve, good morning. So let's start with a big win for Team USA in the men's slope-style skiing event earlier today. A lot of red, white, and blue on the podium, right, Steve?
Yeah, this was an event filled with fireworks and a big-time civil war that ended in the U.S. taking gold and the U.S. taking silver. Really exciting stuff. Alex Hall battling his own teammate Nick Gepper. It was a battle really from the qualifiers into the finals, with Alex finally just saying, you know what, I'm going to put down this really big run. Scores like a 90. Nobody else could touch it, including his teammate Nick, who was doing his best. He's won a slope-style medal now the past 3 Olympics. Both those guys have multiple medals over the past few games, including also their other teammate, Colby Stevenson, who made it interesting as well. He did not medal in this event, but he medaled in big air. So all of these guys now are leaving the games with hardware. They were all there. I was there at the event. It was like this, almost like if your high school football team wins the state championship and it's a bunch of jocks in the hallway with big smiles. That's what this was like. It was like a party. It was really cool to see all of them doing so well and really appreciating where they've been and supporting each other as they continue to win. These guys are winners.
Yeah.
Guys?
Love seeing that support and the sportsmanship. All right, Steve, on the flip side, I hate to have to ask about this. Team USA faced some heartbreak on the ice, losing out on gold in men's hockey in a nail-biter. Tell us about the game.
Yeah, they lose to Slovakia in almost what is the most dramatic way you can lose, which is a shootout. And the most heartbreaking thing about this one is that they had a chance to put Slovakia away several times late. I think they had like almost 4 power plays in the third period, and they just could not do it. Slovakia pulls their goalie. They score a goal very late, like 43 seconds are left. They tie it up. They can't win in overtime, and then they lose in that shootout. This is the second straight Olympics in a row that men's hockey has been eliminated in a shootout. They lost in almost the exact same way in 2018 to the Czech Republic. I think everybody now is very sad for the team, obviously really heartbreaking, but I think we can now really focus our attention on the women's game. Obviously, this is one of the biggest events at the Olympics, the U.S. versus Canada for the gold medal. Guys.
Always a good one, too. All right, Steve, so it might be the end of an era for one of the greatest American bobsledders of all time. What can you tell us about Ilana Myers-Taylor's future?
Yeah, she's telling the AP that she's thinking about hanging it up. And it's kind of sad if this is the way she's growing up, because she doesn't get the Shaun White send-off. We know going into the Olympics this year that Shaun White was going to go, so we could really prep everything for him and have like this big going away party. With her, if this is really it, it's a little bit sad we can't send her off in the right way. What hasn't she done? She is the winningest Olympian in U.S. history on the bobsled. She is the oldest woman to ever win a medal in winter sports for the U.S. She has more medals than any U.S. bobsledder in history. She is 4 for 4 medaling at the Olympics. She has never not taken a medal home, but she's also 37. She's got a child now. She's thinking about the next step in her life, and I think we should let her do that. But if this is the last time, it'd be sad to see her go.
But she is mom to her beautiful son, Nico, so I know she wants to spend some more time with him as well.
And how amazing. Every time she's gone to the Olympics, she's come home with a medal.
Yeah, and she's still got one more left, so we'll see. Maybe that'll be that send-off. All right, Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We do want to turn to men's speed skating now. Team USA made it back onto the podium for the first time since the Vancouver Games.
That's right. Ethan Seprin, Casey Dawson, Emery Lehman, and Joey Mantia combined to bring home the bronze medal in the team pursuit event. And we're thrilled to have Ethan, Casey, Emery, and Joey join us now after their big win for Team USA. Good morning to all of you. Thank you all for joining us. I'll just ask you all generally, how does it feel to have those medals around your neck?
Feels good. Feels really good.
Can we see it?
Yeah.
Look at that. Oh, I love all 4 of you holding it up.
You've done that a few times, I take it. I mean, this is the first time since the Vancouver Games back in 2010 that Team USA has won a medal in this event in team pursuit. What does it mean to you to bring a medal back for Team USA after such a long period without one?
It's huge. I think U.S. speed skating is really ending a lot of droughts here at this Games, and it's nice to be a part of that. We had a plan a couple of years ago that we were going to get together and make this push, even though we don't all train together all the time. And we just had this long journey of trusting one another. Eventually, Casey got here with his problems, and it's just been a long road. And this is really a good personification of all that hard work.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Casey, let's get into some of those problems. So you had a roller coaster ride to get there after testing positive for COVID in January, and really almost no time to make it there and then prepare for the event. I mean, what was that whole experience like for you? I know how stressful it was at points. I think you didn't even have the skates that you wanted, all this kind of stuff. And now to have a medal at the end of it all.
It's amazing. I was heartbroken in the beginning. It was really tough for me not being in Beijing for the 5,000 meter and not being with my team in the beginning of these games. But once I got here, we as a team got together super quickly, and we were able to just get to the line and perform at our greatest like we have all year. And I think that's what the special part is of this team, is that we can just skate together at our best all the time. So, yeah.
I mean, this is the only team event in speed skating. Help us understand just how much time and effort is needed to prep for this.
We spend almost every day thinking about this, whether it's on the ice, whether it's on our bikes, whether it's on the inline or the short track. So our coach has really drilled into us. He's drilled it into our teammates who aren't even in the event. So they've helped us practice. So it's really something that we have been aiming for quite a while now. And it feels very good to be on the podium and be able to represent the USA. And with a bronze medal, it's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. We're so proud of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Ethan, Casey, Emery, and Joey, congratulations. Casey, we're so happy that you made it. And look at you all going home medalists. Thank you so much, you all.
Congrats.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, coming up, more legal trouble for actor Alec Baldwin following that deadly movie set shooting last year. The new lawsuit filed by the victim's family blaming Baldwin and others on the production for her death.
Plus, a multi-million-dollar settlement for the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook school shooting. The landmark agreement reached with gun makers 10 years later. You're watching Morning News Now.
The family of Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchens is suing Alec Baldwin and the film's producers after Hutchens was shot and killed on set.
The attorneys representing the families say Baldwin's reckless behavior led to the tragedy. Baldwin's attorney says any claims the actor was reckless are entirely false. NBC News correspondent Miguel Almaguer joins us now with more on this. Hey, Miguel, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. The attorneys for Helena Hutchens' family say that they have conducted a thorough investigation and carried out multiple interviews. They say two things have become clear. Alec Baldwin should have never pointed a gun at anyone, and cost-cutting measures cost Helena Hutchens' life.
It was Alec Baldwin's reckless behavior and the cost-cutting measures on the set of Rust that led to the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchens. Those are the allegations made in a new wrongful death lawsuit just filed in civil court.
Why is Alec Baldwin responsible for what happened?
Alec Baldwin, number one, was one of the people charged with safety on the site. Number two, he was holding the weapon that shot and killed another human being. There was no need for him to shoot the weapon.
The suit, which alleges at least 15 safety practices were disregarded on the set, blames Baldwin, the film's armorer and assistant director, and others for failing to keep Hutchens safe. The law firm representing the Hutchens family also creating this startling animation, which they say shows how the shot was fired from 4 feet away. They allege the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, was unqualified, which she denies. But in a statement, Gutierrez-Reed does agree with Hutchens' attorneys, who say the production utilized aggressive cost-cutting practices that endangered cast and crew. Baldwin's attorney continues to deny those claims and says Baldwin was not reckless, adding actors should be able to rely on qualified professionals rather than deciding on their own when a gun is safe to use.
I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
In a previous interview, Baldwin said he was aiming the gun at Hutchens at her instruction.
I'm holding the gun where she told me to hold it.
Alec thinks he's the victim. He's blaming Helena. Helena did nothing to cause this, and it's really despicable that he would come out and blame the victim.
This morning, with 4 civil lawsuits now filed, the criminal investigation remains underway.
Now that criminal investigation remains in the hands of the investigators. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, we're told when they're done with that case in about a few weeks, it'll then go over to the District Attorney's Office for possible prosecution. Guys, back to you.
All right, Miguel, thank you so much.
Families of the Sandy Hook victims have reached a $73 million settlement with gunmaker Remington. It's the company that made the AR-15 styled weapon used in the deadly mass school shooting nearly 10 years ago. It is a landmark settlement, one of the largest between gun companies and the victims of mass shootings. The 9 families involved with the agreement say their main goal is to prevent another mass shooting.
Today is a day of accountability for an industry that has thus far enjoyed operating with immunity and impunity. And for this, I am grateful.
The lawsuit alleged Remington irresponsibly marketed the weapon to at-risk young men. Remington has denied those allegations and has not responded to NBC News' request for comment on this settlement with Sandy Hook families. Let's bring in Chris Brown for more on this. Chris is the president of Brady United Against Gun Violence, and she is a lawyer. Chris, good to have you with us. I understand you offered some early assistance in this case, but you weren't heavily involved in it, right?
Yes, we filed an amicus brief, and the theory of the case related to the marketing and sales of the assault weapon by Remington is one that Brady has litigated for over 30 years successfully in the courts. So we're hugely happy about this victory today and view it as a roadmap for similar litigation by far too many individuals in this country who lose their lives, who lose loved ones because of preventable gun violence.
I mean, what do you think this means, especially for the victims' families, these parents who lost their children at Sandy Hook nearly 10 years ago? What does this mean for them?
Well, first of all, you can never bring your child back. And I think I've heard many parents, far too many that I know who are friends of mine, say for even 1 second more with their child, there is no amount of money that could possibly compensate that loss. But we do live in a country where we promise justice for individuals who are harmed, but preventively by corporate activity. And at least yesterday, that promise was fulfilled. For far too many, it has been denied for far too long because this industry, the gun industry, is one of the few industries, the only industry in this country that Congress, because of the NRA, tried to prevent any victim from ever suing. So this is a victory for justice, and it's a victory for far too many families who've been denied the court system as a means to change behavior. And we think it will. We think this will change behavior of the industry, and it needs to happen.
You mentioned, I mean, this case was seen as a path around federal gun laws, which protect gun manufacturers from liability. You say this could be a roadmap for future cases. What does that look like? I mean, do you envision that after we have shootings like this, we're just going to see more lawsuits than we've seen before? What is that roadmap moving forward?
Well, the kinds of marketing that the plaintiffs demonstrated occurred here is really egregious. Communications out in papers and publications to say, get your man card here, research that was shown in Discovery to really try to appeal to young men aggressively around the type of things that can happen, including with video games and other kinds of marketing. Ideally, what we see is that kind of aggressive marketing stop altogether. But if they're not going to internalize the risk that their products create all over the country, this is mass murderers' weapons of choice, are these AR-type weapons, then we will continue to sue and make them change the manner and way that they market and research and try to sell these products that are uniquely lethal.
A key part of this deal includes the release of internal company documents. We're tight on time here, but quickly, why was that so important?
Because it shows what the gun manufacturers have been trying to hide, that it's not just happenstance that the marketing of these weapons seem uniquely marketed to young people, especially troubled people, but that's actually the intent. That's what they're trying to do. In the end, we have to think about these gun manufacturers as entities that are trying to sell as much product to as many people, and it doesn't matter the cost. This litigation seeks to internalize that cost, and it needs to happen.
Chris Brown, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Let's now take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Ali Arouzi joins us from Tehran. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. At least 10 people have died and 11 others are missing after a Spanish trawler sank off Canada's east coast. The crew of 24 were predominantly Spanish. So far, 3 crew members have been rescued, while efforts to find other survivors are ongoing. A Canadian mission was launched involving a rescue ship, a helicopter, as well as fishing boats in the area. However, rough seas and fierce winds have hampered the search for survivors. The 3 people who have survived so far were found in a lifeboat in a state of hypothermic shock because of the freezing water. A row has broken out in India over the right to cover up. A college student wearing a full burqa was attempting to hand in her assignment when a group of Hindu men tried to stop her from entering the university, demanding she takes off her burqa, which she refused to do. The confrontation illustrates the religious divide that's been widening since a group of girls began protesting outside their government-run school in January after they were denied entry to the classroom for wearing a hijab. And finally, Belgium has approved a 4-day week and gives employees the right to ignore their bosses after working hours. Workers in Belgium have the right to work a 4-day week without loss of salary under a government overhaul of the country's labor laws. The reform package will also give workers the right to switch off their work devices and ignore work-related messages without fear of reprisal. And on that note, I'll be switching off my phone and moving to Belgium.
I think we're going to have a big Belgian bureau there for NBC.
Really.
My goodness. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Ali. And coming up on Morning News Now, a possible link between a long life and where you live.
Dr. Torres joins us to share which states are at the top of the life expectancy list and more medical headlines in our weekly Checkup. After the New York Times bought Wordle last month, some think the game is getting harder. But how much has the popular online game changed really? Well, it turns out, at least according to the Times, not that much. It says the guessable words aren't any harder than they used to be. The only changes so far have been to remove some slurs and other offensive words, along with some outdated and non-American English words as guessable options. Also, some Wordlers complained on Twitter yesterday that their solutions did not match up with other players' solutions on the same day. Time says if that's happened to you, try updating your web browser to make sure you have the new word list. And for those of you who are expert Wordlers, the Times also says your streaks should start to sync over time as users transition to the news site. I've noticed some people have had some issues transitioning, and I didn't. Everything was there for me when I did mine, so I guess it's different for everyone.
I still haven't gotten into it.
Yeah.
So can't comment. But
it's a nice addiction because it only takes a few minutes.
I know, and
day.
you can only do one a day, right?
You can only do one a day.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
it's a good block. All right, cool.
Time now for your weekly checkup.
NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us to discuss the latest health headlines that you might have missed. Hey, Dr. Torres, good morning. So a new report from the CDC ranks all 50 states and Washington, D.C. in terms of life expectancy for people who live there. What can you tell us about this?
You know, it's interesting because they looked at different factors that actually produce life expectancy, how long you're going to live after you're born. And the differences are amazing. Hawaii was number one, 80.9 years. And if you look down the chart, you see Mississippi at the bottom, 74.4 years. That's 6.5 years difference, which is astounding for the same country with theoretically the same healthcare system and the same way of life around the country. But what we know is these are the doctor's orders. You know, number one, you can't necessarily change where you live, but you can change how you're living. So look at the factors that are increasing life expectancy in some of those states. Number one, exercise, sleep, diet, avoiding smoking, limiting the stress, or at least understanding how to control your stress, and then making sure that you monitor those health factors, cholesterol, blood pressure, those things we know that can help keep you healthy. So again, you can't necessarily move, but you can actually improve your health factors, and the same as those states where people are being healthier and living longer.
So, Dr. Torres, there are some new methods to help with the lightheaded and dizziness that some people experience when they stand up too quickly. Before we get to these methods, what exactly is happening here and how dangerous is it?
Yeah, it's called initial orthostatic hypotension, and this is a momentary drop in blood pressure when people stand up, because your blood goes from essentially your waist to your brain. When you stand up, it's going from your feet to your brain, so it takes time to catch up. Some of these cases can actually lead to fainting, and that's where the big concern comes in. It usually takes about a minute to adjust, but you can kind of jumpstart that process. So here are the doctor's orders, the things you can do to help out. If you're sitting in a chair, you can do knee lifts, just knee lifts for 35 to 40 seconds before you stand up, and then you won't get that drop in blood pressure. But if you're at a meeting or something like that where you don't want to sit there doing leg lifts, you can stand up and then cross your legs and tense your thighs after you stand up, and that'll help bring blood pressure back up. So that way you won't end up having that issue, and you won't hopefully faint, which is the biggest concern here.
That also seems like maybe tough to do in or during or after a meeting. But maybe you just have to explain. I might faint, so I'm going to try one of these things. That's going to help.
Okay, do what you need to do. Have a little explaining to do.
Knee lifts, anything you need. All right, doctor, this one's kind of interesting. So just like a computer with a full hard drive, older adults may have a brain full of so much wisdom that it could make it harder for them to retrieve memories. Walk us through this and what can be done about it.
You know, we always think about aging and how you tend to forget things as you get older. Where are the keys? You know, did I have my cup of coffee this morning? Those types of things. And we thought it was because of the way the brain developed as you get older. But now what they're thinking is it's because older adults end up having more knowledge. That leads to more clutter. And because of that, you have a harder time retrieving that information you're trying to get. But the other thing they found out looking at this and looking at the study was that more wisdom, that amount of clutter can actually lead to better decision making. It just might be slower decision making. So what are the doctor's orders here? Well, number one, and this is the most important, you need to understand the difference between dementia and forgetfulness. We all get forgetful from time to time, and that's the equivalent to, I don't know where my car keys are. Instead of my end table, they're on my coffee table, that type of thing. It's not that I put my car keys in the freezer, which is a sign of dementia, because that's not a place you expect them to be. And it's okay also if you need more time to retrieve some information. If somebody asks you a question or you're trying to input something in the computer, if you need need more time, that's fine. Again, doesn't mean you're forgetful, just means you have a lot of clutter, you have a lot of wisdom, you're a very wise person, you're just trying to retrieve that information.
That could be your excuse. Be like, I'm just too wise to remember all of this.
I'm too wise, so my keys are gone.
Especially if it takes you a long time on Wordle.
Yeah, exactly. Too smart. Too many words in my head.
My mom's going to like that last one. All right, Dr. Torres, thank you so much. And coming up on Morning News Now, new allegations of abuse and neglect against a New Jersey nursing home that was already under investigation.
Up next, more on the claims that prompted even the governor to respond. A New Jersey nursing home is under investigation again, this time for allegedly failing to prevent the abuse and neglect of its residents. The home previously violated several health codes, including the enforcement of safe COVID protocols.
And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is now responding, saying he is, quote, horrified. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has more on this NBC News investigation.
The New Jersey nursing home where 17 bodies were found stacked in a tiny morgue in more hot water. The state's Department of Health has halted new admissions at recently renamed Woodland Behavioral Health. State officials writing the facility failed to appropriately prevent abuse and neglect, describing in a 17-page report how staff members allegedly failed to perform CPR or call 911 for 2 unresponsive patients, nor did they provide life-saving medicine to some residents with COVID as directed by a doctor. Another individual was left soiled in feces for 10 hours. Authorities say COVID infected more than 230 residents and staff at the facility in just 10 days at the end of last year. 91 residents there have died from the virus since the start of the pandemic.
It was like the worst scenario. He died alone. I know he wasn't taken care of.
Sharon Farrell's brother among those lost.
There's no reason on this earth that people live the way they are living in that facility. Who's overseeing this? Where was the state?
The state is now reviewing Woodland Behavioral's response to inspectors' concerns. The owners declined to comment for this story, but previously told NBC News the COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges, and our heroic staff faced those challenges as best as they could. Harvard professor David Grabowski helps identify best practices for nursing homes nationwide during the pandemic.
These nursing homes that are perpetually among the worst performers, they don't improve without some sort of outside activity.
And New Jersey's governor says he's horrified by Woodland Behavioral's inspection as the federal government warns the facility will lose funding without immediate changes. Back to you.
All right, Emily Aketa, thank you so much.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao is with us this morning. Hey, Silvana.
Hey guys, good morning. The CEO of Moderna says it's reasonable to think the pandemic may be in the final stages. Stefan Bancel telling CNBC as COVID evolves, there's an 80% chance future variants will be less and less infectious. He says we got lucky the Omicron variant wasn't extremely severe, but we are still seeing a large number of deaths around the world. Last month, Moderna started a clinical trial of a booster shot that specifically targets Omicron. Disney says masks will now be optional for fully vaccinated visitors in all indoor and outdoor locations at Disney World and Disneyland starting tomorrow. There is still one exception. Face coverings will be required for anyone to and older on enclosed transportation, such as the monorail, buses, and the Sky Gondola. Unvaccinated people will still need to continue wearing masks in all indoor locations. Airbnb expects bookings this quarter to return to pre-pandemic levels for the first time. That's as concerns about the Omicron variant have eased and people are more and more comfortable traveling. Airbnb says guests are reserving summer stays early this year, with bookings 25% higher than at the same point in 2019. The optimism echoes comments from other companies like American Express, which says travel bookings rose more than 40% in January. Guys?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a summer of travel.
Yeah, definitely for a lot of people.
Thank you,
Absolutely. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, coming up on Morning News Now, spring training delayed.
And that off-season players lockout is now threatening the regular season. The latest on talks between the players union and league owners. We come back. This is normally the time of year when baseball fans rejoice as pitchers and catchers report to spring training to kick off a new season. It's a sure sign winter will soon come to an end.
But the ongoing lockout between Major League Baseball owners and the Players Union is delaying players from reporting, and it's also threatening the start of the regular season. NBC News senior national correspondent Carrie Sanders joins us now from Jupiter, Florida, the spring training home of the Cardinals and Marlins. Hey, Carrie, good morning.
Well, good morning. You know, if all things were normal in the world of baseball, we'd actually see pitchers and catchers showing up here later today. Instead, take a look from above. It's empty here. There are no players and there are no fans. In fact, there's a lot of disappointed fans. Why? Well, this dispute that's ongoing is a contract dispute, and it not only has delayed the start of spring training, it's making the early preseason games that should begin in about 2 weeks highly doubtful.
The crack of the bat and the pop of the mitt. Familiar sounds that signal the start of another baseball season. But this year, spring training delayed. Pitchers and catchers nowhere to be found. The clash between players and team owners has fans of America's pastime crying foul.
It's devastating. This is such a big baseball community.
The dispute resulting in a lockout, now in its third month. It's a major league setback, not just for baseball, but for communities across Florida and Arizona that depend on the financial injection from the teams and their diehard fans.
They eat in our restaurants, they stay in our hotels, and, you know, as it stands right now, we just don't know if any of those folks are going to be in this area this spring.
In Lee County, Florida, where the Twins and Red Sox play, spring training visitors spent nearly $69 million pre-pandemic.
This is the third spring training season that we're kind of going through this. You know, in 2020, it was affected with the start of COVID. 2021, stadiums weren't at full capacity.
Spring training is unique. Fans have much better access to their favorite stars than they do during the regular season.
We've had the chance to meet players up close and personal.
For the last 3 years, Richard Rute and his 15-year-old son Reed have escaped the freezing cold in Milwaukee to toasty Arizona to watch their hometown team, the Brewers. But now, the father-son trip canceled.
Do you care about this dispute?
No, I don't care. I'm not going to pick sides. I'm on the side of the fans here, right? We're the only ones who are really losing out.
The current lockout is the league's first labor dispute since the 1994 strike that canceled the World Series. At the center of this dispute, money. Baseball is a multi-billion-dollar business. And while blockbuster contracts make headlines, most MLB players earn substantially less. The minimum starting baseball salary at just over $500,000, far less when compared to the NFL, the NHL, and the NBA.
Sports fanatics just saw the Super Bowl end. The Olympics are coming to an end. Will they have baseball?
Spring training definitely going to be delayed. The real question now is whether or not the regular season opening day will be delayed.
Where do we go from here? Well, the league says that it has just presented a new proposal to the players that has significant improvements, but the Players Association says it's not going to comment publicly. Meantime, the regular season is supposed to open on March 31st, which is now also in jeopardy. Meantime, the fans who gathered here, well, they're balking at all of this. They just want to see their players out here on the diamond, guys.
It's a big tradition for so many. All right, Carrie, thank you so much.
Thanks, Carrie.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.